Flowers that bleed. The rain fell in relentless sheets, drumming against the glass of Lily's flower shop as the clock struck midnight. Thunder rumbled in the distance, rolling through the quiet streets of the town like a spectral growl Lily had intended to close hours ago, but something about the storm had kept her rooted in the shop. The soft glow of the vintage lamps and the perfume of fresh blooms offered her a sanctuary from the tempest outside. She was pruning a row of lilies when the sound of a bell shattered the calm. It wasn't the shop's usual door chime. This was deeper, more resonant, as if an ancient cathedral bell had rung in her cozy space. Startled, Lily set down her shears and turned toward the door. But there was no one there, only the rain streaking down the glass like tears. Then she saw it, a package sitting just outside on the stoop, wrapped in black silk and glistening with rain. Its edges shimmered faintly under the street lamp's cold light. Lily hesitated. No one should have been out in this weather, and she hadn't heard footsteps or a car engine. A faint unease prickled the back of her neck. Curiosity won out over caution. She stepped outside, the cold rain soaking through her sweater in seconds, and brought the package in. It was surprisingly light, but carried an odd warmth, like it had been held moments before. A faint metallic scent wafted from the silk wrapping, sharp and unsettling. Inside, she found a bouquet of roses, a dozen, their petals a deep crimson so vivid they seemed almost unnatural. They were wrapped in black silk, embroidered with strange, looping patterns. At the base of the stems, a small card was tucked, its edges singed, as if it had been pulled from a fire. Her fingers trembled as she opened the card. Written in elegant, curling script were the words, "Let the petals show you the truth." The phrase wormed into her mind, twisting her curiosity into something darker. She couldn't shake the feeling that the roses were watching her, their blood-red petals vibrant against the dim light of the shop. She placed the bouquet in a vase near the window, telling herself it was just another oddity in the flower trade. But deep down, she knew something wasn't right. As the storm raged on outside, Lily busied herself cleaning up, trying to ignore the lingering sense of being watched. Just as she reached to turn off the lights, her gaze fell on the bouquet again. A dark droplet rolled down the petals of the center rose, leaving a crimson trail in its wake. It wasn't dew or water. It was too thick, too red. Blood. Her breath caught. She blinked, hoping the illusion would fade, but the drop fell onto the silk wrap below, staining it like ink on parchment. The blood pooled into a tiny puddle, and as she stared, an image began to form on the fabric. A young woman in a flowing gown stood beneath a weeping willow, her expression serene yet sorrowful. She clutched a bouquet of roses, identical to the ones now sitting in Lily's shop. The room seemed to shudder. The lights flickered, and the scent of the roses thickened, becoming almost suffocating. Lily stumbled back, her heart hammering in her chest. What had she brought into her shop, and why couldn't she look away? The next morning brought an unnatural stillness, the kind that settles after a violent storm. The streets outside were slick with rain, their puddles reflecting the overcast sky. Yet inside Lily's shop, the air was stifling, heavy with the cloying sweetness of the roses. She had barely slept, haunted by fragmented dreams of the woman beneath the willow. In her visions, the woman whispered to someone unseen, her lips moving in silent desperation. Every time Lily tried to approach, the scene dissolved into red, a smear of color that soaked through her mind until she woke, gasping for air. Now, standing before the bouquet, she felt that same oppressive energy. The roses looked untouched, pristine, their petals soft and inviting. But the stain on the silk wrap remained, a dark and viscous reminder of the night before. Lily reached out tentatively, running her fingers over one of the petals. It was warm, almost alive, and the instant her skin made contact, The room dissolved around her. She was no longer in her shop. Instead, she stood in a garden bathed in moonlight, the air thick with the scent of roses and the distant trill of nightbirds. The woman from the vision was there, her gown trailing on the dewy grass as she walked toward a man in a dark cloak. Lily tried to call out to her, but no sound came. The man and woman met beneath the willow. Their embrace was tender, their whispered words heavy with longing. But as the vision sharpened, Lily noticed something wrong. The man's grip on the woman's arm was too tight, his shadow stretching unnaturally long behind him. Suddenly, the woman's gaze snapped up, locking onto Lily as if she could see her standing there. Her eyes, wide with fear, seemed to plead for help. Lily stumbled backward, her heart racing, and the vision shattered like glass. She was back in her shop, clutching the counter for support. The roses sat undisturbed in their vase, yet she could feel the weight of their presence. Her fingers were smeared with crimson, the faint scent of iron mingling with the flower's perfume. The bouquet wasn't just a gift, it was a window into something ancient and terrible. And Lily had the sinking feeling that the roses weren't finished with her. Each petal held a story, and each drop of blood promised to show her more. The shop had become a prison. Days passed, and Lily found herself increasingly unable to leave the roses behind. Each time she stepped toward the door, a weight pressed against her chest, dragging her back. The shop's familiar warmth had turned cold, the once comforting scents of lavender and eucalyptus now overpowered by the metallic tang of blood. The visions came every night. They were no longer fleeting glimpses, but vivid and oppressive scenes that yanked her into another world. She saw the couple again and again, their love both tender and devastating. The woman, Eleanor, was a noble, her every movement imbued with grace and sorrow. The man, Alec, was a servant, his devotion to her palpable but forbidden by the rigid class divide. But as the visions deepened, so too did the darkness that surrounded them. One night, Lily saw Alec kneeling before Eleanor beneath the willow, offering her a single rose. It was identical to those in the cursed bouquet, its petals unnaturally vivid under the moonlight. Eleanor accepted it, tears streaming down her face as she whispered her love. Yet something in Alec's gaze was unsteady, his devotion twisting into desperation. "You promised me," he murmured, his voice jagged like broken glass. "You swore we'd be together forever." "I meant it," Eleanor replied, her voice trembling. "But not like this." The vision blurred, and Lily felt herself being yanked forward, like the roses demanded she see what came next. The willow's branches parted like a curtain, revealing a figure cloaked in shadow. Alec turned to the figure, his expression hardening. In his hands, he held the bouquet of roses. "This will bind us," Alec said, his voice rising in a feverish crescendo. "No one, not her family, not even death, will keep us apart." Eleanor screamed, trying to pull away, but Alec crushed the roses between his hands, their petals bleeding crimson. The shadowy figure whispered an incantation, words that curled like smoke and seeped into Lily's mind even as she tried to resist. Lily awoke gasping, the echoes of Eleanor's screams still ringing in her ears. She stumbled to the roses, gripping the vase as if she could shake the curse out of it. The petals now glistened with fresh droplets of blood, their color darker and more foreboding than ever. She needed answers. Clutching the singed card, Lily searched for any clue about the bouquet's origin. She scoured forums and ancient texts online, her search finally leading her to a name: Magnus Harker. A reclusive horticulturist, Harker was rumored to have dabbled in forbidden botany, experimenting with plants said to trap and hold spiritual energy. She found his address deep in the countryside, a decaying manor surrounded by wild, overgrown gardens. Ignoring the growing sense of dread, she set out that evening, determined to confront him. The journey was fraught with unease. The road twisted through dense woods, the skeletal trees casting long, claw-like shadows. When she arrived, the manor loomed like a corpse under the pale moonlight. Its windows stared blankly, and the air carried a rancid sweetness. Magnus greeted her in the doorway, his frame gaunt and his eyes sunken like a man who hadn't seen daylight in years. He studied her with a mix of curiosity and dread, his gaze lingering on the bouquet in her arms. "You shouldn't have brought that here," he rasped, ushering her inside. The interior of Magnus's home was suffocating, filled with an overwhelming scent of decay and flowers past their prime. Every corner was cluttered with strange plants, their petals sharp and unnaturally vivid. In the center of the room stood a table covered in faded manuscripts, dried herbs, and jars filled with unidentifiable substances. Magnus motioned for Lily to place the roses on the table. The moment the bouquet touched the wood, a faint vibration rippled through the room. "Where did you get them?" he asked, his voice low but insistent. "They were delivered to my shop," Lily replied. "No name, no sender, just this card." She handed him the singed note, and his expression darkened as he read it. "Do you understand what this is?" he said, his voice trembling. "These roses are not flowers. They are prisons. They were created by Alec centuries ago with the help of someone like me. Eleanor's soul was bound to them, along with his, when she tried to escape him." "Escape him?" Lily's voice cracked. Magnus nodded grimly. "Eleanor was desperate to flee, to end their forbidden love and save him from his own obsession. But Alec refused to let her go. He used dark magic to trap her spirit in the roses, believing it would bind them together for eternity. Instead, he cursed them both." The blood drained from Lily's face. "Why was the bouquet sent to me?" Magnus hesitated. "The curse needs an anchor, someone to witness the story, to keep the memories alive. It's a cycle. Once you've touched the roses, they won't let you go. Not unless... Unless what? Unless you perform the ritual to free their souls." Lily's stomach churned. "How?" Magnus gestured to the manuscripts. "The ritual must take place under the next full moon. You'll need to burn the roses while reciting the incantation, but it won't be easy. Alec's spirit is tied to the roses, and he will fight to stop you." The room seemed to darken as Magnus's words hung in the air. The roses began to tremble, their petals bleeding faster. A cold wind swept through the house, extinguishing the lanterns and plunging them into darkness. A voice, low, guttural, and filled with fury, echoed from the bouquet. "She is mine." The blood pooled on the table, forming a distorted reflection of a man's face. Alec's image glared at Lily, his eyes burning with possessive rage. Magnus grabbed her arm. "We must prepare. If you fail, their curse will claim you next." As the roses bled and Alec's voice filled the room, Lily realized there was no turning back. She was entangled in the lover's tragedy, and the only way out was to face the darkness head-on. The full moon hung low and heavy, casting a pale, ghostly light over Magnus's garden. The air was bitterly cold, thick with the sharp scent of iron and smoke from the ritual fire crackling in a stone pit. Around it, Magnus had arranged a crude circle of blackened stones etched with arcane symbols. The bouquet of roses sat at the center of the ritual space, bleeding steadily onto the earth below. Lily stood at the edge of the circle, trembling. The weight of Alec's presence pressed against her chest, a suffocating reminder of what was at stake. His voice echoed faintly in the air around her, soft and venomous. "You don't understand, Lily. I loved her. I still love her." The words seemed to twist her thoughts, threading doubt through her resolve. She glanced at the roses, their petals now blackened at the edges, exuding an unearthly glow. Magnus gripped her shoulder, snapping her from the spell. "Do not listen," he hissed. "He will say anything to stop you. You must focus." He handed her a weathered parchment with the incantation, his hands shaking as he avoided looking directly at the bouquet. "The fire will weaken him. Once the roses burn, his connection to this world will shatter. But he will fight you. Do not falter." Lily swallowed her fear and stepped into the circle, clutching the parchment tightly. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, the wind howled to life, whipping her hair around her face. The fire guttered and flared wildly, casting jagged shadows across the garden. A deep, guttural growl rumbled from the roses. The blood pooling beneath them writhed like living veins, spreading toward the stones as if testing the circle's boundaries. Alex's voice grew louder, his tone laced with desperation and rage. "Do you think burning these flowers will set her free? Do you think you can undo what binds us? She belongs to me." The ground beneath Lily trembled, but she planted her feet firmly, raising her voice above the chaos. She began the incantation, her words halting at first, but gaining strength with each syllable. The roses shuddered violently, their petals curling and blackening further. The blood hissed and steamed as the flames consumed it, the tendrils recoiling with shrill, otherworldly shrieks. Alex's shadow rose from the bouquet, a towering, malformed figure with glowing red eyes. "You dare!" he snarled, his voice a deafening roar. "I will drag you into the abyss." Lily's heart pounded as Alex's shadow lashed out, slamming against the circle's stones. Sparks flew as the barrier held, but cracks began to spiderweb across the symbols. "Keep going," Magnus shouted, his voice almost lost in the cacophony. Drawing on every ounce of willpower, Lily recited the final lines of the incantation. The parchment in her hands burned away as the words left her lips, scattering embers into the roaring wind. The fire surged higher, engulfing the bouquet in a blinding column of light. Alex's scream tore through the night, a sound of pure anguish and fury. His shadow writhed and twisted, its edges fraying like a tapestry unraveling under the relentless pull of the flames. And then, from within the fire, Lily saw her. Eleanor's face appeared, her eyes filled with sorrow and gratitude. Her lips moved silently, forming the words, "Thank you," weight of his presence lifting in an instant. The fire burned out, leaving only a smoldering pile of ashes where the roses had once stood. The garden fell silent, save for the faint crackle of dying embers. Magnus approached her cautiously, his expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "It's done," he said softly. "They are free." But Lily felt no relief. The air was too still, the silence too heavy. She turned her gaze to the ashes, a sinking feeling gnawing in her stomach. Before she could speak, the ground beneath the ritual site caved inward, forming a jagged, dark pit. From its depths rose a single blood-red petal, pristine and glistening. Lily stepped back, her breath catching in her throat. Magnus's face turned ashen. "No, that's impossible." The petal floated upward, carried on an unseen current, before settling gently on the ground outside the circle. As it touched the earth, a faint laugh echoed in the air, soft, sinister, and unmistakably Alex. "You can't destroy love," the voice whispered, fading into the night. The petal pulsed once with a crimson light before dissolving into the soil. The garden fell silent again, but Lily knew the truth. The curse wasn't broken. It had only shifted, planting its seeds in a new cycle, and somewhere in the distance, a single rose began to bloom.